Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our HSJCC webinar on the Toronto Northwest Justice Centre. My name is Trevor Timchak, and I'm the chair of the Communications and Knowledge Exchange Committee for the provincial HSJCC. A couple housekeeping items for the webinar. We will have question and answers at the end of the webinar. You can type in questions during the webinar in the chat box or in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. The webinar is being recorded, and links to the recording and the PowerPoint presentation will be sent out in the next day or so once they're ready on the website. There also will be a very brief evaluation survey included with that, so please fill that out if you could. About the HSJCC network, we consist of 38 local committees, 14 regional committees, and 1 provincial HSJCC, each of which is a voluntary collaboration between health and social service organizations, community mental health and addiction organizations, and partners from the justice sector, including Crown attorneys, judges, police services, and correctional service providers. We do have quite a few speakers, and I'm not going to introduce all of them, but I will turn it over to our first speaker, Scott McKean from the City of Toronto.
Great, thank you so much, and thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I have the honor of sort of facilitating today's discussion, but before I begin, I just wanted to start by acknowledging that where I'm presenting from in the City of Toronto is on the traditional territories of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people. It is now the home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. The city also acknowledges that the City of Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, which is signed by the Mississaugas of the Credit, in the Williams Treaty signed by multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. In addition, I also want to take a moment to just, in support of my city, my colleagues and my friends, in support of our stance to confront anti-Black racism, I also want to acknowledge that not all peoples came to these lands as settlers or migrants. I particularly want to take a moment to acknowledge those that came here as a result of the transatlantic slave trade and acknowledge the impact and the legacy of slavery on African peoples. And so in support of the City of Toronto's ongoing efforts to confront anti-Black racism, I just want to take a second to pay tribute to those ancestors of African origin and descent, especially in this decade of international African peoples. And so with that, my name is Scott McKean, and thank you so much for having me here today. I have the honor and pleasure of working at the City of Toronto, and every day I wake up to serve 2.9 million people in my job, and I represent the coolest city in the world, and I have the ability to brag all over the world about my job. And recently I've made that job even cooler because I get to cross governments. And so as a result of some innovative thinking from the Ministry of Attorney General, and in particular Dana Aaron, I actually get to work as an embedded member of the Ministry of Attorney General. And so I get to serve the City of Toronto with half my time, and I also get to work on what we're talking about today, which is justice centers for half that time. And so right off the top, I get to be the first example about the innovation that justice centers is bringing to our systems. And with me in particular, it's enabling cross-government collaboration, communication, and innovation. Today, we're going to be talking about the Ontario Justice Centre pilots, and particularly focusing on a piece of work that I get to do and work on, which is in the Toronto Northwest. And I can assure you that our panel is filled with champions, both at within the court system, within the corporate system, within the Ministry of Attorney General, but also within community. you'll hear from our community partners. And then you'll also get to hear from me about how their amazing work is connected to the municipality and how I get to support that. So just to make sure, I know we have a tight agenda, so I'm going to dive right into the presentation. And first and foremost, in every project, there is someone in the background that is not really sleeping a lot, always thinking about moving this work and being a champion. And I'd like to introduce you all to Dana Aaron, whose perseverance, whose persistence, and whose will to partner and partner with community to develop innovative responses to people within the justice system as what has enabled justice centers. And so without further ado, I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Dana Aaron.
Thanks, Scott. As always, I'm humbled, and it has been really an honor to work with the city and with Scott. I'm going to take too much time. I'm going to turn it over to Miriam, but just to say, Scott, on behalf of the city, really thinks across systems to support communities in a way that has inspired this work on behalf of the province, not just in Toronto, but elsewhere in Ontario. So if we jump forward really quickly on the slides, Holly, we're not going to go into an overview of it. We're going to do a quick introduction, and Miriam and everybody here who we're really honored to have with us is going to take you through all of the various aspects of the Toronto Northwest Justice Centre pilot. And if we jump forward, and in the interest of time, really going to do this slide, and then Miriam, I'm going to just turn it over to you to take you through. But as Scott said, we are working in 4 different communities. We had the opportunity to talk about London briefly last week. But we are doing this work of creating a new community court model, which is easier said than done. And it takes a leap of faith and innovation and drawing on best practices from different justice center models and integrated human service delivery models across the world, across the country, and here in Ontario. And all of this work has been grounded in really in-depth needs assessment that we've gone into community to ask community how we could do justice differently, step by step, and amidst a global pandemic. So Miriam, without further ado, and really like a testament to the work that you've been doing in Toronto Northwest as one of the leading youth justice crowns in Ontario. It really has been a privilege to have you on board and leading this work in Toronto Northwest along with everyone else. So Miriam, I'll turn it over to you and answer any questions in the Q's and A's as they come up. But thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Miriam, and I have the honor of being the Crown Attorney for the Toronto Northwest Justice Centre. So in the interest of time, I'm going to speak quickly and tell you what we are doing. What we're doing in Ontario is we are changing the way justice is delivered to people, not just anybody, but particularly marginalized and vulnerable people. How are we doing that? We are bringing together community and justice. As of September of 2020, we began our new court model, and that's in London. We have 4 different locations. 3 of them are operational and are pilots that sit 1 day a week. I'm speaking about the Toronto Northwest. For those of you not from Toronto, that is in the northern part of the city. We have a justice centre in downtown Toronto. We also have one in London, Ontario, and one in development in Kenora. And what we have done is we've looked at what's happened around the world. We've looked at the literature, the social science, the neuroscience. We have looked at other justice centers, and we have come up with what could serve the different communities in Ontario. And in order to determine what the needs are, we went through a very comprehensive community needs assessment to ascertain what the needs of the different communities are. But if we go to the next slide, before I go into exactly what we're doing, let me just talk about a little bit about what a justice center is, because this is an incredibly unique and new court model to Canada. There are there's over 70 of them in the world, and every single one of them is completely different from the other. Why? Because they are in response to the particular community's needs that they've identified. So they all look different. What they all have in common, however, is that they take what is the traditional criminal justice process and embed that in community. But what does that mean? That means we bring together health services, employment services, education services, social services, and embed that into criminal justice. And the reason we do that is because it is how you break the cycle. of recidivism and violence. We bring together those supports because we address individual needs through front-end supports when somebody comes into the criminal justice process. We also look at prevention by providing them services for skills going forward that will help them, and also that will help them reintegrate in community going forward. We know that justice centers help individuals because they're responsive to the needs of individuals. We know that justice centers improve outcomes for victims in communities because they help to address the cycle of violence, and they also address the needs of victims. We also know that we can't do this alone. And so this is a cross-sectorial approach. We need everybody's help, and we have embedded many different partners. We need Ministry of Education, we need health, we need the City of Toronto, which is why you've heard from Scott and you'll hear from Scott again. There are many, many significant issues that bring people into conflict with the law and young people in conflict with the law, and we need everybody's help, and that's what Justice Centers do. We bring together all of these supports to wrap around young people. So if we move to the next slide, that is to discuss what is the current context that we're doing. As I indicated, we are 1 day a week because this is a pilot. And what's brilliant about it is that we are improving. It's a constant process. And you'll hear from me later how we've, even in the year that we have launched our court, we've changed our models because we are responsive to community, people with lived experiences, what we are hearing from people, because the whole point is to make this specialized in particular and unique to the needs that we're serving. So we have done this all through COVID, which I don't have to tell anybody on this line how challenging that has been. We are sitting remotely in all of our justice centers, but we've still managed to have individual supports and wraparound supports for people, and we have improved outcomes that we're happy to tell you about. So that is the context that we've worked in. And if we move to the next slide, in particular, what is the Toronto Northwest? What is the context? Why did we pick this particular location for a justice center for young people? We know a number of things about the communities, which there are many. For those of you not familiar, there are many communities within the Toronto Northwest. We know that there are a high level of racialized people in the Northwest and a very high population of Black people in the Toronto Northwest. We know that these are neighborhoods that are challenged by the intersection of poverty and race. We know that there are issues in terms of accessing healthcare, mental health, education. There's housing insecurity, there's food insecurity. We also know that COVID, which has been terrible for everybody, has had a stronger impact on those who are marginalized and vulnerable. And so that these community members have had the trauma of the impact of COVID for the past couple of years, which has impacted on young people in particular, their outcomes in schools and their mental health, et cetera. So this is even more important than it was 2 years ago. We also know that even though COVID changed so much, it did nothing for gun violence in the Toronto Northwest. If those statistics remain exactly what they were. And we know that gun violence not only completely traumatizes the individuals that are involved in the incident, but the entire community, because that's where you just went to go for a walk. That's where your child goes to school. Those are the streets you walk on. So we know that there is ongoing trauma for people living in the Toronto Northwest. We've also taken a look to see what's happening in terms of charges in the Toronto Northwest. Our courthouse is 2201 Finch, and we have a huge geographic area, and those charges all feed to that one courthouse. So we took a good look in our needs review about what is happening in that courthouse. And what we know, for example, is that robbery is a significant offense for young people. That's actually not particular to 2201, but we know at 2201, 1 in every 5 youth cases, they're charged with robbery. And that's very significant. So we have then taken all this information that we know that these are communities that are struggling for many reasons, that they are many newcomers into these areas as well. They're racialized and they're newcomers. And we also know that when you talk about the Black community, that's not one community. And so what the justice centers do is take an individualized approach to human beings. And what that means is we recognize we have Black people here, been here for generations. We have people who are newcomers from different parts of the world with different cultural backgrounds and religious backgrounds. And so what we try to do is have our services speak to the individual that is before our court. So we've taken all this information and looked at all of the decades worth of research about the issues in the Toronto Northwest. And we've looked at people and interviewed people with respect to their lived experience and service providers and stakeholders in criminal justice. And we've come up with our court model. One model that we have is the Enhanced First Appearance Court. And this is a tremendous initiative because this allows that every single young person that comes into the Toronto Northwest gets services. They get services particularized to them. And the reason we call it the Enhanced First Appearance Court is traditionally what happens when you're arrested by police and released, or arrested by and released by a bail court, is that first appearance post-release tends to be 8 to 10 weeks from the offense historically. And what we have done is move that up so that 3 weeks after the offense and the charge, that is when you have your first appearance. Why is that significant? Because we know that rapid intervention is very important. If you're penetrating into criminal justice, you have some problems that are happening in your lives, and we want to assist with those issues. So you'll hear from our service providers about exactly how they do that. But what we do is we provide them services in a streamlined fashion and give them referrals in community and referrals through the Justice Center if they need them, which you will hear about in a moment. And what they're then able to do is take all of that and go to 2201 and have a trial. And so they have their constitutional rights protected, they can have a trial and also have their needs met. And that is a tremendous change in criminal justice because that is new. Historically, what happens is people have trials, they're on bail for about a year or more, and it's at sentencing when they're found guilty that then people order reports and try to find out, well, what's happening with you? And in the interim, this is a young person, and we know that a year or more in a young person's life is significant, and early intervention to provide supports is how you actually break the cycle. And so that's the Enhanced First Appearance Court, and that is completely unique to be able to access services for identified needs and yet be able to have a trial. What we also have is the Robbery Court. And that court is in response to the statistic I just told you about. We know that robbery is a very significant charge. There are many reasons people commit robberies: economic robberies, peer group temptation robberies, robberies that are as a gang initiation. There are low self-esteem robberies. There's many reasons. And so we've identified that as a charge that we want, a gateway offense for many young people, that we want to have them, if they're interested in resolving their matter, stay in the Justice Center for conclusion. So they have the same early intervention, but then their case remains at the Justice Center. We have a dedicated judge on the dedicated Crown, and we have dedicated service providers. So those young people see the same people every time they come to court. They're serviced by the same people, and that's how we're successful. So if we move to the next slide. This is a slide that essentially gives you more detail about the two different streams that we have into our court. And when I talk about how we keep changing, we initially thought we would only keep robbery charges to resolve in our court, but recognized quite quickly that there are many, many other offenses that we're able to service young people and keep those cases at the Justice Center until conclusion. And so we actually have many charges at the Justice Center that stay until conclusion. But this participant pathway is just to try to show you a snapshot of what it is that the young person would experience coming into the Justice Center. On the top left, what you see is that police and bail courts are releasing young people directly to the Justice Center. The Justice Center is voluntary. The first appearance is mandatory. And if they're interested in the Justice Center, they can stay and participate in all the services we have. What we've done is we facilitate their access to counsel. On the very first appearance, we make sure that they have a lawyer, and whatever the barriers may be, that we assist them with that. That is significant. So we have our own dedicated duty counsel, so they have access to our lawyers, but we can make sure that that right is preserved. We also then have, and you will hear from them today, social workers who do intakes, interviews with the young people. And what they do is they assess what needs you have, what needs are being serviced and are not, and they create what we call an individual plan. And that is referrals and an action plan of how best to service the individual needs of the young person. We have in-house resources that we can assist young people, and you'll see this on the slide. We have our own psychologist who can do immediate counseling for those who are identified as having needs for therapy. And as we already know, this is a set of communities that have difficulty accessing supports. We have our own psychiatrist, a child and adolescent psychiatrist who can assist with assessments, psychiatric assessments, medication assessments, risk assessments. We can facilitate cognitive and academic assessments so that we can understand how young people learn and provide them the tools they need in the education sphere to be successful. So we have these in-house service providers, also including an education advocate who gets assigned to young people when they flag for an education need. You're going to hear about what they do from them directly later. What is unique about this is that we have these services that people can access, but then we also have all of these community partners, and you will hear from one of them today who provides a unique service particularly for Black youth. And so what we do is create an individual plan, and a young person can then take that individual plan and use that plan and get those services and go to 2201 and have a trial. They can also, and you see here, their counsel can have a meeting with me, and then we determine what an appropriate resolution is. The individual plan is not always the Crown position on a resolution. The individual plan is about the individual needs of a young person. Very often they relate to the charge before the court, but we have a Crown pretrial. We determine what makes sense in terms of outcomes. What we look at is rehabilitation, reintegration. They're being held accountable through the process, but we're looking at how to break the cycle. And one of the things we do is do this rapidly. So the line you see across the bottom of that slide is just showing that we do things much faster in the Justice Center. Why? Because we know that it is important that young people get in and out of the process quickly. We know that we don't want them to have identity around being charged, going to court constantly, being on bail constantly. That is not good for the self-esteem of a young person. So everything is rapid. That's why we bring services to people, because in the traditional system, cases just get adjourned. Well, a defense lawyer gets retained, and that might take a while. And then it gets adjourned again because, well, we need to go to a family doctor to get a referral to go to a psychiatrist, but actually my client doesn't have a health card. So we need a health card. And then we need, and while all of these adjournments are happening, a young person who has real issues is getting rearrested. So this is how we've managed to deal with that rapid intervention in individualized supports that wrap around a young person that remain after the charges are concluded, because identified issues are not just related to the charges, they're about their lives. So we do aftercare plans, and so they have those services for them as they go forward. If you move to the next slide begins to show what our outcomes are. We already know that we do things faster in the Toronto Northwest than happens in the main court. Cases are completed faster, but they are completed in a way that's individualized to the young person. What we do is we don't say, oh, you're charged with robbery, then this is the program you need, and this is the legal outcome of your case. That's not what we do. You're charged with robbery. Our first question is why? And how can we help you? And what are the needs that you have? And what has been serviced and what hasn't been serviced? And what can we do to fill those gaps? So as I said, we've done this through COVID, and you can see we've had 37 unique agencies. That's a number that's going to continue to grow. Many service providers had to shut down with their service providing, obviously, given the pandemic. And so that's a number that's going to continue to grow. But what is brilliant about that is that it is these are individual services for identified needs. That is a unique approach. That is what Justice Centers is about. You'll hear from Delta Family Services about cultural relevant programming that they administer for those youth, Black youth and their families that we've identified as needing supports. What we can tell you is that 100% of all young people who come into the Justice Center get assistance with their identified needs. As I've said, we have dedicated people who make that happen, that make it happen rapidly. And just out of interest, and you will be hearing from our education advocate, but 46% of all young people who come into the Justice Center leave with improved education status. You've got to stop and think about what that means. We know what that means in terms of the chances of your success going forward. If you have an education, we're able to get them linked with employment, help to assist with any significant housing needs they have. I mean, this is how you break the cycle. This is how you give young girls self-esteem. This is how we manage to reduce recidivism. Because it's not about what you're charged with. It's about who you are, what your needs are, and what we can do to assist you. So what you're going to now hear from is from Luminous. And Luminous, as I say, we have social workers who do the intake, who make the connection for that young person. We call them system navigators, and they help the young person manage these referrals and their lawyer and the Crown. And this is what they do. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to both Lul Omar and Chelsea Davis, and they're going to talk about what Luminous does and how they serve the young people in the Toronto Northwest.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Lul Omar. I'm one of the social workers with Luminous Community Services. So I'm just going to give you a breakdown in terms of who Luminous is. So Chelsea and I work for Luminous. Luminous's journey began as an amalgamation of 4 legacy agencies in April 2020. The agencies include Adventure Place, Skylark Children, Youth and Families, Griffin Center, and Etobicoke Children's Center, in which we all became one agency. Luminous offers a broad range of high-quality mental health, developmental, autism, and early year intervention services to children, youth, families, and adults across Toronto. Luminous's mission is to create seamless access to service while reducing barriers to care for future and existing clients. And we can move to the next slide.
Thanks, Lul. So the first step is the young person's first appearance. So Lul and I have satellite locations that we work out of. So young people charged in 11, 12, 22, and 23 division have the option to appear in person at Albion Neighborhood Services at the Rexdale Community Hub. And young people charged in 31, 32, and 33 division may also appear in person at 1126 Finch Avenue West, where Lul is located at Luminous. Young people who appear in person who do not have access to technology have the opportunity to join the court virtually with the provided laptop with the help of myself or Lul. And young people can speak to duty counsel in a private breakout room at their first appearance for legal advice. And it's a space where we conduct intakes and have meetings as well. And it's a great opportunity to connect with the young person in order to establish rapport with the youth and their family. And we've seen a lot of benefits since implementing the option to appear in person at the satellite locations. So after more than 2 years in the virtual world, many young people enjoy meeting in person and have been open and honest about what their needs are and what has led them to conflict with the law. And meeting in person allows us to flag issues early on and make those rapid referrals if the youth wishes to participate at the Justice Center. And another huge benefit to the satellite locations is being able to answer questions for the young people and their families about processes and timelines of being involved in the justice system. So we've had parents or guardians arrive to their teen's first appearance feeling anxious and stressed, and they often leave with clarity, knowing that there's a team of dedicated supports that can assist their child navigating this court process. We can go to the next slide and pass it over to Lul.
Thank you very much. Our role as systems navigators is to connect with each young person who participates at the Justice Center. We complete an intake interview that highlights areas that the youth may need assistance with. This allows us to facilitate culturally specific and relevant community-based referrals. We work collaboratively with the community to meet the needs of each young person. We make referrals to counseling, youth outreach workers, ID clinics, hospitals, employment agencies, schools, and so much more. Through our intake, we're able to gather information about each young person in order to help them navigate through the court process and connect them to appropriate services. We also collaborate with these services that the young people are already connected to in order to get that information back into the court and advise them of that. And we can move to the next slide.
So just quickly, we just wanted to take the time to highlight an example of one young person that we had. So we have a 16-year-old girl who was initially very resistant to services, but she connected very, very well with one of the counselors through our collaboration with Delta Family Resource Center. And they were able to build and foster a really good relationship. So our role has allowed us to meet young people in the community in order to access services and meet their needs. So with this particular young person, I was able to meet with her at Service Ontario because she had goals to get a job, but she had no identification and very, very limited family support. We were actually able to obtain all of her ID, and we applied for her SIN number. and she recently just got a summer job. And while completing the SIN application, she looked at me with all of her new ID in hand and said, "Oh my gosh, this is such a big accomplishment." And just last week, she sent a text message picture of her work name tag and her ID badge, and is just so excited to start working this summer.
I just wanted to conclude by stating that during intake, we've come across many young people who have education needs that are not being met. By flagging these concerns at the early onset of this process, young people are referred to our education advocate. She's been able to assist with serious school-related issues such as pending expulsions, appeals, school transfers, and other time-sensitive matters. Young people and their families have expressed great gratitude for this connection and navigating the school system as well. And from there, I'll pass it over to Kafia Abdirashid, who's our education advocate.
Thank you, Lou and Chelsea. Hi, everybody. My name is Kafia Abdirashid. I'm the education advocate embedded into the Justice Center. I'm a lawyer at Justice for Children and Youth. Some of you may be familiar with Justice for Children and Youth as it is a member of the provincial HSJCC. But for those of you who are not, Justice for Children and Youth is a non-for-profit legal aid clinic that specializes in protecting the rights of children and youth facing conflict with legal systems, such as the education system, social services, or mental health systems. It is a specialty legal clinic funded by Legal Aid Ontario. It provides legal services to young people under the age of 18 and young people who are experiencing housing instability under the age of 25. Justice for Children and Youth utilizes a children's rights perspective, taking into account the opinions, wants, and needs of our clients as they are conveyed to us by them. We can go on to the next slide, please. Justice for Children and Youth assists young people across a myriad of different areas, including criminal justice, education, family and child protection, health and mental health systems, homelessness, immigration, income support, privacy, and victimization. As well, it comprises of 12 folks, 7 lawyers, and they provide direct legal services to children, youth, and adults who may support them in different ways. We also do community development, public legal education, and law reform. Next slide, please. So my role is unique at Justice for Children and Youth, as I am specifically at the Justice Center, assisting young people who are in conflict with the law with their education-related needs. In particular, the central areas that I've been assisting young people with is registration and attendance. It comes as no surprise that COVID-19 has impacted young people disproportionately, especially young people who are already marginalized and struggling in school, continue to struggle, if not disengage from school altogether. A lot of the young people that I've been connected to have been disengaged or have stopped attending altogether. And I've been assisting them with re-engaging in the way, meeting them where they're at and re-engaging in the ways that they are willing and able to, as well as providing them with the tools to continue to try to get reconnected back to education or explore other non-traditional educational programming. With their involvement in the criminal justice system, it can bleed into their education, in that sometimes their charges may impact their ability to attend at their school. I've been involved in trying to ensure that their privacy is maintained, as well as easing their transition, assisting them with appealing non-administrative transfers, as well as non-discretionary transfers, suspensions, expulsions. I've also been assisting young people with their special education needs, trying to ensure that their accommodations are being adhered to or getting them accommodations for the first time. Also helping them figure out why they might be struggling with their education, with learning, as well as trying to ensure that they are still able to participate in their extracurricular and school involvements while navigating their criminal charges. Oftentimes, I found that young people were interested in exploring non-traditional educational programming options, but they weren't aware that was available to them, such as apprenticeships, co-ops, and other work-related opportunities. Sometimes young people have additional things that are going on in their life and may need some assistance to have a modified schedule to be able to meet their needs, and while still staying engaged in school. Oftentimes I'm working with attendance counselors and school boards and school administrators to help the young person re-engage in the way that they are able to, and meeting them where they're at. I'm going to pass it off to Kemi with Delta Family Resource Center.
Thank you, Kathy. This is Jackie. Hello, everyone. My name is Jackie, Jacqueline Dyer from Delta Family. I'm the program manager for the Mary Donna Youth Justice Program. Kemi is also on as well as our ED at Delta Family, and I welcome Kemi to add to the conversation if she so feels to. We can move to the next slide. Just a bit about Delta Family. Delta Family has provided a variety of wraparound, culturally appropriate programs and services, prioritizing the Black community and residents in Northwest Toronto for over 40 years. Next slide, please. Delta Family's strategic priorities are really focused on reducing poverty and community capacity building. And how we do this is by providing workshops for community workers and residents to enhance and involve in skills and practices. We enhance family wellness and mental health. We've been really focusing on developing and growing our roster of family counselors and our youth in transition team, prioritizing Black programs for the Black community, really highlighting our youth justice programs that we have. We have programs for family and behavioral programs, Kujistahi, which really focuses on our leadership programs, and of course our family wellness programs, which is our counselor program initiative, as well as our youth in transition pieces, enhancing programs for family, youth, and seniors, and enhancing our organizational infrastructure and information management, which is around sourcing other spaces within our communities to be able to better put systems in place for our vastly growing organization. Next slide, please. So just to jump right into Mary Donna Youth Justice and who we are, our program really focuses on providing culturally appropriate services to the Black and racialized youth and their families that are navigating the justice system and other systems as well. We've seen cases come in as well around the education piece, right? And so connecting them with services that are really focused on the navigation and that meet their interests and needs. Our work is really focused on reducing recidivism, providing tools, of course, for youth and their families to succeed and have better quality of life, and internal and external referrals. So I know we work closely with Luminous, Chelsea and Lou, who are our system navigators. A lot of our referrals come in from them in terms of our families. And then we have a roster of youth justice workers who work directly in and beyond the courts with youth and families to build an action plan, which is highlighted through their interests and needs. And we work with our family counselors who provide safe space for critical healing and other wellness supports and offer that wraparound, very culturally tailored piece to our youth and families that we work with. The Mary Donna Youth Justice Program is primarily focused on youth between the ages of 12 and 17. Next slide, please. So Mary Donna works from a very tailored approach. This slide here really highlights our resource tool that we've developed with community, with experts in the field to really talk and hone in on areas of interest of families. And so during this process, we developed this resource tool that kind of guides some of the conversations that we have with family, with youth, in particular, our youth justice workers work with the youth and delivering these workshops to them through our process. It's usually a 10 to 11 week program process. Of course, there's exceptions. Sometimes the youth stay in longer. And so we really just work and tailor, it's very customized, the approach, and we work with the youth and their families through that. We really focus on the work is delivered through our partners. Our delivery is how we focus on our tailored approach, our delivery and our partners. Again, highlighting our partners who we worked very closely with to develop this resource tool. Our referral strategy as well. We're really working with the system navigators for the referrals to come in. It's then triage to our youth justice worker, who then makes contact with our system navigators and the youth and their families to put together a plan in moving forward. We highlight topics that are of interest to the youth and their needs and their families when accessing services. So sometimes families come into the program with with one specific need, but in the conversation and within the program, other interests and needs are highlighted. And so we work really closely to connect them to our internal partners, as Delta Family has a vast of different initiatives and programs and services that we offer, tapping in out to our external partners as well, and really making sure that we're focusing on what is highlighted by the youth and their families, focusing on learning and developing new skills that will so they can find and learn new ways and forms to go about their life, and being accessible on our virtual platforms. Of course, we talk about COVID, that has had a major impact in how we connect and communicate. And so making sure that we are, at this point, we're kind of working in a hybrid model, but being accessible in the ways that are comfortable and work for youth and their families. Next slide, please. So our services include, again, justice navigation and accessible information and having information that is accessible. And so through this journey of Meridani, we've really heard from community where they would like some information that is very basic, one-on-one in navigating systems, specifically to the justice system. And so through that process, we've created a 5-part mini webinar series that really hones in and talks about just really important information, basic information in navigating the justice system. The first video is around a roadmap of the justice system. The second talks about words you hear in court, what they mean, how you prepare for your first court appearance, how community supports can support your and improve your outcomes, as well as tips on choosing a lawyer. And so those have been made available to community, including our resource tool that's been made available to other community workers as well, just to kind of guide and support the work that we're doing with families. Our services really focus on increasing knowledge of self and identity, focusing on self-care, mental health and well-being, accessing, as I spoke about the webinars, to critical resources for sustaining stronger families. So really honing in on building family relationships, speaking about family dynamics, which is one of our workshops that we offer as well, fostering development of skills to navigate complex systems. So that goes to our education system, our justice system, really tapping into what supports are highlighted and engaging in conversations on family attachments. And finding non-traditional and critical forms of healing. We really work closely with our family wellness team, our counselors, to kind of tap into that individual and family counseling that is identified by families. We've been getting a lot of great feedback from the youth that we've been working with and their parents. Families have been very receptive to the program, we find. Parents have been very grateful as well for their learnings that they've received from speaking with our youth justice workings and just getting connected to Delta Family on a whole. Other family members have really tapped into, getting their children into other pieces of programs that are available at Delta Family. And so we've been seeing a lot of great work and been getting a lot of feedback. We had one parent actually last week who their youth their child completed the program, and they were really huge on showing their child how to give back to community. And so they were inquiring around how can we have this young person kind of give back to community. And so they've tapped into our community food pantry program and provided some food and some snacks to support that program. And so it was just a learning experience on the whole, and the parent was so grateful. The young person is so grateful, still wants to continue to figure out how they can be involved in different programming and settings within community, and showed a very strong interest in community work on a whole. And we were surprised as well from a young person last week who just sent us a testimonial of how appreciative and grateful they were to be a part of the program, and how much they've learned and how much they've evolved in being a part of the program. And that just shows how important it is for us to work collaboratively together as partners. You know, I know Chelsea has been working closely with one of our youth justice workers and being able to go and visit a young person. And so that's just showing that as we work to get together, we're definitely building community and stronger. So thank you. And I think I will pass it over to Scott.
Thank you so much, Jackie. And just before I speak about the city's role, you know, I just want to pause again and just point out the innovation that's happening and the collaboration that's happening, and you know, the diverse range of skill sets required to provide this new kind of support to individuals. And so before I even talk about the city's work, on behalf of the city and behalf of the Justice Center's team, I want to thank Dana for leadership in enabling this, Miriam for her passion for working with young people and for building bridges between the court system and community, for Lul and Chelsea for, you know, you've heard the examples that they shared. This is the kind of outcomes that we ought to be driving for Kafia for being the first education advocate in any program, and a model that if you're a funder in the audience, I highly urge you to tap into what Kafia is doing. We need more Kafias in our system, and obviously the very culturally rooted support that Jackie and her team are providing are all like individually fundamental parts of the collective suite of services that makes up justice centers. And so it's a nice segue, because for me, as a representative of the city or the municipality, we actually don't play a role in the justice system, but we sure do play a role in the prevention side of this work, and also supporting individuals who've been engaged in that system. And so we have a unique place. In addition to our role, you know, the municipality, in addition to being a funder, a service delivery provider, a policy broker, a convener, in addition to those roles, we have recently just completed the development of SAFE-TO, which is a 10-year community safety and well-being plan. And there's an interesting connection to the province in that every single municipality in Ontario was legislated to develop and design a community safety and well-being plan under the Community Policing Act. And so if you are working across Ontario and you're working in a municipality outside of Ontario, I'm about to demonstrate that there's an immediate connection to your work with justice-involved individuals and your municipality's community safety and well-being plan. From a Toronto perspective, we really are responding to calls from community to think differently about what safety means. Historically, in our city, safety really was about crime or policing, when we all know on this call, and as you've heard from my colleagues, the well-being of people is really what can help enable a safe community. And if that well-being is not attended to, that's where we see the sort of root and evolution of unsafe conditions or unsafe communities. And so what SAFE-TO does is provide a roadmap and will actively try to move 26 actions over 7 strategic goals over the next decade. And City Council has taken a bold step and endorsed SAFE-TO and really set us on a path to reduce vulnerability, to reduce violence, advance truth and reconciliation, promote healing and justice, invest in people, invest in neighborhoods, and drive collaboration and accountability. I won't go over the full plan, but I will send out links so you can review it online. But I really want to talk about the connection to this Justice Center work. If I can go to the next slide, please. As part of this work, as I said, the city is a service provider, but we also invest in communities. And so right up front, we actually invest directly into the system navigator role. And that is embedded right and in line with the principles and practices of our youth development work at the City of Toronto. And so we invest and we help coordinate on the back end the role of system navigation within the service. I also, there is my role, and I work across governments to help draw the necessary connections to other kind of support services, such as employment. So our type team, our Toronto Youth Partnerships for Employment team, support young people who are involved in the Justice Center project, as well as Toronto Employment Social Services, our children's services, and other city services that are connected or that are connected to the young people or their families. And so I play an active role in helping develop not only the approach to that relationship, but also developing those kind of connections. And it's not uncommon for, Lou or Chelsea to be servicing young people on a daily basis, and then they hit a stumbling roadblock and to call Miriam or myself, and we try to make those deeper connections to city services. I also service and support the Downtown East Justice Center, which we're not talking about today, but just as an example, in that Justice Center, we actually help facilitate connections to supports for those dual diagnosis developmental disabilities. And so what we've done as a city is we've actually embedded justice centers right into our community safety and well-being plan, SAFETO, as an action. And so our commitment to sort of, strengthening access to community justice by prioritizing culturally responsive reintegration, restorative practices, including justice centers, is an action that the City Council has committed to, and that we will continue to support and work with the Ministry of Attorney General to advance justice centers. So some of the ways in which we're doing that is looking at cross-government investments and aligning our investments so that they're integrated and complementary and working towards a common goal. We're looking at cross-government service planning, and so I have the ability to work with Miriam and Dana and the team directly on the Toronto Northwest, as well as the Toronto Downtown East site, and build those bridges to city connections and make sure that we're using a cross-government lens that enables and empowers our community partners. And then lastly, we've identified 60 strategies, over 60 strategies that are already moving safety and well-being in the city. And so my role is to make sure that there's connections between the work that's happening at the Justice Center and that very important work that's happening outside the city as a prevention mechanism. And then lastly, I would say that we're learning a lot from this. We're learning about, the young people we're serving, the families, and the kind of supports and the things that Miriam talked about, those root issues that are probably significantly contributing to people ending up in the justice system. And so as we learn that, we can take that information and work with community partners and other funding institutions to try to drive prevention-based outcomes or drive prevention-based investments that are responsive to the emerging needs of justice centers. And so with that, I know that we have about 6 minutes left. There's been some significant question and answer in the chat. Maybe we can just open it up to if there's any other questions that people may have. We're happy to take them across the panel with the remaining 5 to 6 minutes that we have left. Thank you.
Yes, if anyone has any questions, please type them in the chat or in the Q&A. I will, while we're waiting, review a couple of questions that we did get. One was asking if youth who have serious charges, such as those who are placed in open or secure custody, if that's offered to them. The answer was yes. And another was asking about those who reoffend if they're allowed to utilize the Justice Center, and the answer was also yes. And unless I'm mistaken, and I'll ask my own question to follow up on those, that in effect, the sort of long-term idea of these justice centers is that they are in some ways a replacement for the traditional model of the court system. And so therefore, the idea is to include as many people and types of cases as possible, unless I'm mistaken. So you wouldn't want to turn people away, even if they maybe had reoffended or had a serious charge or something like that. You're trying to include as many people as possible, even though this is a pilot and you're including specific demographics. You're trying to include as many people under those conditions. Is that not correct?
I think that's a fair thing to say, because what we have, as I said, is the enhanced first appearance court. So you can keep coming back, accessing services and have trials. We are trying to serve people in our catchment area, our jurisdiction. And yes, the idea is to service the needs of people who have identified needs. I see that there is another question here.
Yeah, there's a question about psych assessments and how are those records retained?
So the way we have done this is the enhanced first appearance court is designed that you can have assessments done. Those are provided to counsel and the young person. They are not provided to the Crown. So when the matter is then adjourned back to 2201, you can have a trial. So it's confidential what happens, because otherwise, why would defense counsel ever access that? That would be a problem. So it's confidential, and it would be as if you had some private service that you said, look, you need to go speak to an education advocate, a mental health worker, a psychiatrist, and it's not all in one place that you send your client to. So that's how it's designed. So in terms of how the 34s are ordered, when we are keeping a case, and it's our case, and it's a case where there's a finding of guilt, then it is attached to the information, and it is like any other 34 that you would see. When we have our psychiatrist do a 34, it is a 34, a court-ordered 34 in the same way. It's just that it's not attached to the information unless the matter is resolving at our Justice Center.
Someone's asking specifically about this Justice Center is when the mega courthouse is created, where will the Justice Center, this Justice Center, be located?
We are embedded in community that you've heard. The new Toronto courthouse, for those who don't know, is an amalgamation of all the Toronto courthouses into one courthouse in downtown Toronto. Justice centers are separate from that courthouse. What we are dealing with are cases that are not going to trial, and young people who are in the Toronto Northwest who want services and then want to resolve their cases. Those who want services and want a trial will then have their trial at the new Toronto courthouse or 2201 until the new Toronto courthouse is completed. But we are separate and distinct because it feels different when you come into our court. When we have a physical location, it will feel different than a courthouse because it will be embedded with community supports, and it's youth-centered and justice-centered, and everybody in the Justice Center is a youth expert from their own particular discipline and field and experience. So it feels different. So it's very important that it doesn't come into a regular courthouse. So no, that is not happening.
Okay. And the final question, because we're just about out of time, and I warned that it would be coming, was about expanding the idea of justice centers to the rest of the province. And I know that Dana, I think, is still here, so.
Yeah, no, it's Dana here. So right now we are working on these 4 pilots. No jurisdiction in the world actually has embarked on 4 justice centers or community courts sort of at one time simultaneously, especially ones that are just so tailored and embedded in communities. Each one is very distinct from the other. What it looks like in Toronto Northwest is very different than what Kenora will look like, or downtown East End or London. So we're starting with these 4, testing it out, seeing what works, changing what doesn't, and we'll continue to evaluate. But we've had lots of requests for justice centers elsewhere, but we just want to get these ones right.
Well, thank
Trevor, just before we wrap up, and pulling these presentations together, it always takes, the people you see and then the people you don't. I just wanted to take a second to acknowledge our colleague, Holly Lubert, who's the Crown Counsel with Justice Centers, who played a significant role in facilitating and organizing this in the background. And then also Kemi Jacobs, the Executive Director of Delta, who must be very proud of Jackie and her team's performance. So I just wanted to make sure we shine the light on those two champions who are part of this work in the background. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you for everyone who attended. Again, this will be posted on our website shortly. So look forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a good afternoon.